This is a story of 1570 years ago when many barbarian tribes attacked the Roman Empire. The barbarians and Huns attacked many cities of the Roman Empire and wreaked havoc. The people living there wanted to run away, but on one side was the Adriatic Sea, and on the other side was the Tranian Sea, which was blocking their way. They had only one option left, so they started running away to the nearby islands in the sea. When they reached there, they were saved from the attacks, but these islands were built in the coastal lake, whose soil was so soft that even humans could not stand on it. But against all odds, these people not only settled here, but also built buildings, canals, and even bridges, showing the achievements of engineering one after the other. This is the city that the world knows today as Venice. Despite the fact that there were no roads, no land, and no clean drinking water, the Venetians made it the most powerful city. But how did all this become possible? How was such a big city built on those small islands where it was not even possible to stand? That too, about 1,000 years ago. Welcome once again in the videos of Informative World Watch, viewers. The people who left the Roman cities and went to these islands in the beginning had no place to live here. The soil was so soft that if you kept anything on it, it would get stuck inside. At that time, many people suggested going back to the coast, but the meaning of return was death. The barbarians and Huns were some of the nomadic tribes of northern Europe who attacked here, taking advantage of the weakness of the Roman Empire. At that time, the situation was so serious that it became their compulsion to live on these soft islands. More than 150 small marshy islands were 5 kilometers away from the coast. But all of them were in the same condition. During this time, one of the refugees was getting stuck in the ground. To save himself, he buried his boat's chapu in the ground. So after going down many feet, it became completely solid. This is where they got the idea, which later became the basis of Venice City. A few kilometers from here, where today's Croatia is, trees were brought from the forests there, and they were buried on the marshy islands. After going down about 5 meters, these trees used to go into the hard soil of the ground and make their grip. They were pushed in close to each other so that they could form a stable platform. After putting the piles inside, the upper part of them was cut and leveled, and wooden planks were laid on top of it so that the entire load could be equally divided in the piles. To raise this foundation above the water level, special blocks of limestone were placed. A load of stones on top and 5 meters long wooden piles below. This simple combination was enough to make a strong foundation. The wooden planks that were now in the water, they became loose and tight in each other, and there was no place for air to pass between them. This is why the piles that were dug in Venice about 1,000 years ago are still in perfect condition and bear the weight of the city. After putting the foundation, the work of building on top of it began. Initially, the Venetians built wooden houses, but during cooking, they often caught fire. Later, the use of bricks also began. To keep the buildings light, the houses were not kept more than 3 stories. A special groove was made from limestone powder in the middle of the bricks so that the walls were also flexible with strength. The floors and inner walls were made of wooden planks, which were held by placing iron rods from the outside. This idea became quite famous in the Venetians, and as soon as they saw it, the islands were filled with houses in the same way. Normally, cities spread outwards, but Venice began to spread inwards. Earlier, it used to be that only boats could go from one island to another. But later, when the population began to increase, the islands began to get closer and closer. And now, the islands could be crossed, even by sitting on horses in less water. Now, the most important thing in Venice City was to connect these islands to each other. Until the first 500 years, these islands were not connected to each other. But when the population increased a lot and the business began to grow, the business hub here, which is called Rialto, first tried to build a simple wooden bridge here. This bridge is called the pontoon bridge, in which a path is made with the help of floats. It became easier to reach Rialto from this bridge, but because it was standing with the help of floats, it used to shake a lot, and often people used to fall from it. Later, a permanent wooden bridge was also built here, but in the year 1310, it was set on fire due to a riot. Even after the fire, the Rialto Bridge lasted for the next 140 years. But finally, in the year 1444, it collapsed due to the increased load. Finally, to connect Rialto, the first stone bridge of Venice was intended to be built here. To make it, the same method was used, with the help of which thousands of houses were built here. More than 12,000 wooden piles were built on the banks of the river, and a 10,000-ton stone arch bridge was built on top of them. This bridge was so successful that in all of Venice, stone bridges were built in the same way. Even today, this bridge is standing with the same strength and tolerating the weight of people. With the help of these bridges, it has become even easier to go from one island to another. There are no roads in Venice City, but only canals. And these canals are used to reach from one place to another. This made it easy for Venice to transport goods to any corner of the city. By the way, in normal cities, there was only one way for pedestrians and horses at that time. Due to this, there was a lot of congestion, but Venice was completely different from this. Here, the way for pedestrians is completely different from the way for boats in the canals. And the biggest advantage is that anyone can get off the canal and reach their home quickly. Soon Venice became the most powerful and rich city in Europe. And the biggest reason for this was its location. If you look at the map, this is the Adriatic Sea, at the end of which is Venice. And this sea meets directly in the Mediterranean Sea. And the Mediterranean Sea is connected to Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. Even today, the easiest and cheapest way to transport goods is considered the sea route. That is, to reach Western Europe from the Middle East and East Europe, where Italy, Austria, Hungary, Germany, and France are, ships could easily reach the end of the Adriatic Sea, where Venice is present today. Of course, East Europe is connected to the west by land, but because at that time the only means of transport was ships, then everything from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean and then the Adriatic Sea was sent by ships. And because there were more cargo ships coming here, cheap cargo ships were also found from Venice to send goods from Western Europe to East Europe, because they had to go back empty. Due to business activity, the Venetians became very rich. Seeing this, the people of the neighboring countries also settled in Venice, and as soon as they saw it, the population here increased a lot. Now in Venice, the demand for drinking water has increased to an extreme. Although Venice is surrounded by water from all sides, but it is the salty water of the sea that cannot be drunk. Due to the absence of natural springs or rivers, fresh water was not stored here. In Venice, drinking water was brought from the mainland by filling it in drums and loading it in boats. But when the population here was 170,000, then there was a shortage of water. At this point, the Venetian engineers needed to use their brains again. Something had to be done so that the increasing population of Venice could get drinking water. Otherwise, the business here can also be affected. In Venice, there were a few parts of the island where construction had not been done. A deep pit was dug on those islands to store rainwater, and its walls were made waterproof with soil and gravel. If you think that rainwater will be stored directly in these deep pits, then it is not so. In fact, the Venetians' thinking was more advanced than this. A well was made in these pits, and sand and stones were placed around it, and tiles were placed on top of it to make it a plain surface again. Some holes were left on the surface from which the rainwater could go inside. This water used to filter when it was collected in the well from sand and stones. This is the natural process of water filtration. When rainwater comes down from the mountains in the form of splashes, it passes through stones and minerals and becomes completely clean and drinkable. This filter system of the Venetians worked on this basis. But the question is, how much rainwater will be stored in such a small area? For this, pipes were installed on the roofs of nearby houses, which started working to directly put the rainwater in this filter. The surface area was also increased for the collection of such water. As soon as it was seen, more than 600 small and large filter wells were installed in Venice. 10 to 12 houses started sharing the same filter well. The Venetians once again prepared a masterpiece to save their city. But there was still a big problem in Venice: sewerage. Normally, underground sewerage lines are laid in cities, which take the waste away from the city. But if there is no ground in Venice, where will the sewerage lines be laid? Until now, people in Venice threw waste into the canals only. But those who did not have a canal directly in front of their house, they threw their garbage on the pathways only. Because of this, these pathways are often filled with stench. In the 16th century, the Venetians made drains from their houses for waste collection, with the help of which the waste fell directly into the canals. These drains were kept above the normal level of the canal, due to which the liquid waste of the drains fell into the canals at the same time, but the solid waste remained in the drain. Then during high tide, when the level of the canals increased, the water would pull the solid waste inside the drains into the canals. High tides occur twice a day in the sea, and twice a day, the drains themselves would be cleaned. Due to high and low tides twice a day, the seawater would enter the canals of Venice and take the place of polluted water. In this way, not only the drains of the houses, but also the canals of Venice would be clean. And because it is salt water, which also works as a disinfectant, even today, this sewerage system is working in Venice. Surprisingly, the engineering that was made by Venice 1,000 years ago, it is still working. Building foundations, canals, bridges, and sewerage system. Let me tell you that Venice is slowly sinking into the ground. This is a natural process, because of which, every year, this city is sinking 1 to 2 millimeters. This is the only city in the world where there are no cars or motorbikes. Every year there is a flood here, which is called acqua alta. In winters, the water level here increases a lot, and often the walkways go inside the water. Every year, 60 lakh people visit Venice, but the local population here is less than 50,000. I hope you will like and share this video of Informative World Watch. Thank you very much for your loving comments.